Hello friends, and welcome to History Chronicles. Today, we continue our journey through World War II, focusing on one of the most resilient and inspiring aspects of the war, the Polish civilian resistance movements. When Poland was brutally occupied by both Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, its people did not sit idly by. Instead, they organized a massive underground resistance that became one of the most significant in all of Europe during the war. We will explore the origins, structure, and actions of these civilian movements, their extraordinary courage, and the impact they had on both Poland and the wider conflict. The first to resist. The Polish resistance began as soon as Poland was occupied in September 1939. While the country's military was overwhelmed by the combined forces of Nazi Germany from the west and the Soviet Union from the east, its spirit of resistance never wavered. Even though Poland was partitioned and its government forced into exile, civilians in the occupied territories worked tirelessly to resist their oppressors. Germany's occupation of Western Poland and the Soviet Union's occupation of the eastern regions were marked by extreme brutality. The Nazis aimed to wipe out Polish culture, enslave its population, and exploit the country's resources. The Soviets deported hundreds of thousands of Poles to Siberia and Kazakhstan, while eliminating Poland's political and intellectual elite. In the face of such violence, Polish civilians began organizing in secret. These efforts eventually coalesced into the Polish Underground State, a unique institution that served as a secret government within the occupied country, led by loyal Polish officials operating from hiding. The Home Army, Armia Krajowa, part of the resistance. At the center of the civilian resistance was the Armia Krajowa, or Home Army, formed in 1942. It became one of the largest and most well-organized resistance movements in all of occupied Europe, with nearly 400,000 members at its peak. The Home Army answered directly to the Polish government in exile in London and carried out covert operations against the Nazis, including sabotage, intelligence gathering, and guerrilla warfare. The structure of the Home Army was meticulously designed to operate in secrecy. Members were recruited in small groups to limit the risk of exposure, and these groups acted independently of one another to prevent widespread crackdowns by the Nazis. Many members of the Home Army were ordinary civilians, teachers, doctors, students, who balanced their daily lives with their roles in the resistance. Daily life for resistance fighters. Life for members of the Polish resistance was incredibly dangerous. They lived under constant threat of being discovered by the Gestapo, the Nazi secret police, who were notorious for brutal reprisals. Entire families were often arrested, tortured, or executed if even one member was found to be involved in resistance activities. The civilians involved had to adapt to a life of secrecy. Resistance members used underground communication networks, code names, and safe houses. Every day was a calculated risk. If a meeting was discovered, it could result in mass arrests. Yet, despite the overwhelming danger, civilians remained committed to the cause of liberating their homeland. Women played a crucial role in the resistance as well, often serving as couriers, nurses, or spies. They smuggled weapons, messages, and information between cities, helping to maintain the flow of intelligence crucial to the resistance. Their involvement was instrumental in keeping the underground network functioning under the harshest conditions. Sabotage and intelligence gathering. One of the primary functions of the resistance was sabotage. The Home Army conducted numerous attacks on German supply lines, railway networks, and communication systems. This disrupted Nazi operations and slowed down the German war machine. Factories that produced weapons and equipment for the German army were targeted, and key infrastructure was destroyed in daring operations carried out by ordinary civilians. At the same time, the Home Army excelled in gathering intelligence. Polish resistance fighters provided the Allies with some of the most vital intelligence of the entire war. In particular, they sent detailed reports about Nazi military movements and atrocities, including the locations of concentration camps and the systematic extermination of Jews. It was through Polish intelligence that the Allies learned of the existence of Auschwitz and other death camps, bringing the horrors of the Holocaust to light. Operation Tempest. the resistance takes the fight to the Nazis. One of the most significant efforts of the Home Army was Operation Tempest, which began in 1944 as the Soviet Red Army advanced toward Polish territories. The plan was for Polish resistance fighters to rise up and liberate their cities ahead of the Soviet arrival, showcasing Poland's sovereignty and preventing Soviet domination. In several key cities, including Vilnius and Lviv, the Home Army fought valiantly against German forces, sometimes with the help of advancing Soviet troops. However, the Soviets often betrayed the Poles. Once a city was liberated, the Soviet NKVD, secret police, arrested Home Army members, viewing them as a threat to post-war Soviet control of Poland. The betrayal of the Polish resistance by their supposed allies was one of the great tragedies of the war and would shape post-war Poland for decades. Cultural resistance, fighting for Polish identity. The resistance was not just military, it was cultural as well. The Nazis sought to erase Polish culture and identity, closing down schools, destroying cultural monuments, and banning the Polish language in public life. In response, the Polish people engaged in a cultural resistance, keeping their heritage alive through underground education systems, secret libraries, and cultural events held in hiding. Teachers, professors, and artists became part of an underground network of education, teaching Polish history, literature, and language in secret. This was a defiant act of resistance against Nazi attempts to Germanize the Polish population. By preserving their culture, Poles fought to maintain their identity even under the harshest conditions of occupation. The Warsaw Uprising, a story for another day. One of the most significant events in the history of the Polish resistance was the Warsaw Uprising of 1944, an incredibly courageous but ultimately tragic effort to liberate the city from Nazi control. However, that is a story we will save for another episode in this series, as the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and the subsequent events deserve detailed exploration of their own. The legacy of the Polish resistance. Polish resistance left an indelible mark on the history of World War II. Despite facing two brutal occupiers, the Nazis and the Soviets, Poles continued to resist with unyielding determination. The Home Army and other civilian resistance groups fought not only for military victory, but to preserve Polish culture, identity, and sovereignty. While the war ended with Poland falling under Soviet influence for decades, the spirit of resistance lived on, influencing the fight for freedom that would eventually lead to Poland's liberation in the late 20th century. In the next episode, we will shift our focus to the north, where another fierce battle for survival took place. The Winter War between Finland and the Soviet Union. This brutal conflict saw a small but determined Finland resisting Soviet aggression in one of the harshest winters on record. Stay tuned as we dive deep into this extraordinary chapter of World War II. If you found today's episode insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to make sure you catch the next episode. As always, thank you for joining us on History Chronicles, and we'll see you next time.